Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader with my comic book thoughts of the week. I have been very slow to get to my comics this week. In fact, there are some I haven't gotten to, and some of the ones here are older. Uh, but anyway, my top four favorite comics of the week are right here. Um, and a lot of the other comics I read were really close, really right up there. But can't really beat Little Nemo, it seems. I loved issue one. Issue two just continued the fantastic art, the whimsical, spot on, just right kids' fantasy story, in that Alice in Wonderland kind of vein, but to me, better than Alice in Wonderland. I really like this. Um, it's definitely, a huge part of it is the art by Rodriguez, and the coloring by Nelson Daniel, I think. Yeah, colorist Nelson Daniel. They just work so well together. It's a whole lot of fun to read, a whole lot of fun to look at. There's interesting stuff at the back. There's a little kind of history of Little Nemo's adventures, the original Little Nemo's adventures here in the back. It's just a really sweet package. Highly recommend it. I'm usually really cheap. I don't like to buy $4 comics. This is totally worth $4. The only sad thing is that it's bi-monthly. Um, One funny note is if I've looked from the library, I've looked at the old Little Nemo comics, and there's a character called Flip, who I think is a middle-aged man in blackface, minstrel show stuff, and it's quite racist, but I guess at the time that was a common clown figure. And here they've tried to pretty much keep the way he looks, but make him green. So I don't know what their thoughts on the racist imagery from that. Even the Spirit from the 40s had some very racist imagery in it. Actually, kind of worse than blackface in a way. Not that blackface is pretty bad, but anyway. So I don't know. Does that solve the problem, making him green and a little less obviously someone doing blackface, but still not denying that that's what happened perhaps back then? Anyway, if that's not a problem for you, you can take it in historical context. This is just so wonderful of a kid's comic, one that anybody who's still a little bit of a kid's at heart can totally enjoy, and that my daughter's wild over. After we read this, she made her own Little Sophie in Dreamland comic book, which she managed to do for about 6 pages before she gave up, which is very sustained. 6 pages in an hour or two. Another huge favorite of mine was the next issue of Daredevil, which I guess is a week or two old. I just got this week in the mail, starting with an incredible cover, just an incredibly well drawn and colored story, incredibly well paced by Wade and Samney. It's just like there's nothing too flashy about it, but it's just a perfect comic book reading experience. It's a mastery, in my mind, of the rhythms and the feeling of how you read a comic book. I don't know how to put it, but just totally loved it. Much more than just a spooky story about a superhero and some kids with some supernatural mind control abilities should be. But every part of it was great. I did not know the Purple Man has regenerative powers, so I guess he will be back in the mix next issue. And I'd assumed that this would be it would be just a 2-issue story, but I guess it's going to be at least a 3-issue story. Maybe because of it's being kind of a Halloween kind of story. But anyway, brilliant stuff. Still one of the best superhero comics in the business. Top notch. Saga was back on top. Saga has not been one of my top picks in, I don't know, 5 months or so. But this issue was just wonderful, and of course now they're going on their hiatus, and I'm gonna be on the just dying for more for 2 months or 3 months before they come back, sometime in 2015. The artwork, as it's kind of boring just to talk about how great Fiona Staples is, and it always feels like she's never like going all flashy and being obvious, but it always feels like she's advancing both with her line work and layout, but with her use of color. She does her own color, and that's very important to her. That picture might be a bit of a spoiler for people who didn't know that character was coming back. My computer just put itself to sleep, so I'm flying blind here. Come on, wake up, computer. Okay, there we go. I was about to freak out. How am I going to film this if I can't see myself or know that I'm being on film? There was a crazy sexual moment in here, and some really awful bad guys, rapey, evil bad guys who looked gross too. I have to say one thing about Saga. I mean, we talk about it being all realistic with relationships and stuff. There's a lot of, and then there's the unrealism of the science fiction, fantasy-ish elements, but there's also a lot of unrealistic characters who are 100% bad, evil people. But then we've got the heroes who are a mixture of good and bad and stuff. So Saga's a complex dance between melodrama, the good and bad, good versus evil kind of story, the soap opera kind of story, the more complex moral story, the story of families and parents and children. So it's a wild and sometimes wonderful mix of things, and the mix just really came together nicely in this issue. It is weird to me, a story that's so much about parenthood is so vulgar. I was just thinking about it. I think I was listening to a podcast where they talked about whether Saga sometimes pushes, maybe it was iFanboy, sometimes pushes their buttons too much with the vulgarity of it in various ways. And I was thinking, now that I've become a parent, and maybe it's just the community that I live in, but the parents don't curse. I used to be around people who cursed and said all kinds of things, and know older people much older than me, for instance, who don't have kids, who just regularly curse in their thing. But anyway, it's just a little odd that this story that's so much about parenthood doesn't, I don't know. I feel like everyone that is around me, once you have a kid, everyone you meet has a kid and everything like that. They all speak in this gentle way. They're getting used to talking the way you should talk around kids. Maybe in other communities it doesn't matter if your kid learns, to say F you at age 2. But so then maybe that's just where I live. Anyway, that thought was not really triggered by this issue so much as about iFanboy talking about this issue, but it resonated in my head a little bit. So Saga has all these great elements, but also sometimes they bang into, there's jarring discordances for me. Not in any way to put down this issue. I loved it. I hope this means, I know some people have been disappointed in Saga in the recent arc, and I've been one of them a bit. Some even dropped off of it. Some other people found it perfectly great still. But anyway, I'm hoping that the flavor of this issue continues on for a while. And then, pardon the cover. There's a really great cover, and my comic book shop stuck me with the Halloween cover, and I didn't even notice in my rush this week until several days later, and I didn't have the energy to go and bring it back and exchange it. if they have any left. But this final issue of Wonder Woman, issue of the Azzarello Chang Wonder Woman, which we are probably never to see again. Azzarello Chang and Wilson, Matt Wilson, the colorist, has been a really crucial part of it and is fully in front of things in this issue. The colorist and the art, everyone's gone all out for this. And unlike most really long stories that, even if they land the ending pretty well, you just can't live up to the weight of that long story. This story totally landed the ending. It's amazing. It amazed me. I was not expecting it to be this good. With clever twists and other things. It would be great if there was another story by Azzarello Chang to explore all the implications of what's happened in this last issue, because I know we're not going to get that from the Finches. Maybe someday they'll come back, although if they do ever come back, there'll have been so much water under the bridge that I don't think we'll be getting a continuation of this story if they ever come back. Not that I want the story to continue so much as just all the character growth for various characters and revelations. More of that marvelous coloring. In fact, it should be mentioned that Matt Wilson is now also the colorist on Daredevil, and I think Daredevil already had good coloring, but I think it's even better, and the coloring is starting to mean more and more to me. Yeah, I don't want to give away too much for people who maybe haven't read this. If you were wondering, do I really want to read all 35? It's really 37 issues because of a 0 issue and a Villains Month issue that are part of this story. Do I really want to read all 37 issues? I'm guessing that'll be like 6 trades, 5 or 6 trades. Yes, you do. It's good all the way through the end. It has a great ending. So that's just so amazing. It's so wonderful to say that. So Wonder Woman is like Daredevil, one of the very best superhero comics out there. Now, it did it by being not so much a superhero comic and being more Vertigo, horror, mythology mixed in with our superpowered characters. But yeah, it's just one of the best comics of the last 3 years. And let's hope DC can do more good comics like this, because it feels like they're disappearing at the moment. So my an honorable mention I wanted to mention, because I was very late to the party in reading Thor #1, and I read it along with, I don't think I've already mentioned this in another video, I read it along with Thor #25, the previous run of Thor, which really is the introduction to this issue. And those 2 issues together, I don't have the other one right here with me, but were an incredible read, really great. So that's another really fantastic Marvel comic book right now, is Thor. I thought I was going to hate this because of the view and the hype and whatnot, but I read Thor 25 and I love that so much, and then I just picked up Thor #1 right away, and it was a continuation of the same story with really great art, really great coloring. This is colored by Matthew Wilson also. Let's double check that, but I'm pretty sure. Yes, Matthew Wilson. So 3 of my favorite comic books right now are colored by him. And he is generally the colorist on Swamp Thing. I hope he doesn't leave it. He was not the colorist on the annual. And I feel like I noticed the difference. It was also, the annual also had weaker art anyway. But there was nothing, other than this cover, there was nothing gimmicky about the story, and I think it really is going to explore the basic sexistness of Odin, which I think is interesting, and it was done in a balanced, interesting way as Odin comes back after Asgard has been ruled by the All-Mother, And Odin just assumes he can come in and he's in charge again with no question after the All-Mother's been running everything. But why do we assume that he's better at running things than the All-Mother? And Thor, the old Thor, the man Thor, I don't know what we're going to call him now, Odin's son, pays a real cost here. Not only losing his hammer, but losing some other stuff, which also ties in neatly with other stuff that Jason Aaron has done. Hopefully, when Jason Aaron's sticking with Thor for the time being. I think there's no sign that he's going to stop anytime soon, but eventually he won't be doing it. But hopefully, all the stuff he is establishing here about Odin's son Thor, and whatever else he does with the female Thor, hopefully all of that will be permanently cemented in the Marvel mythology of Thor, because it's been so good. The three granddaughters of Thor, for instance, the future granddaughters of Thor, are such good characters. It's funny, because you think of Jason Aaron as this really macho kind of writer, but he's creating all these great female characters, and you're suddenly noticing that, or I'm suddenly noticing that. You get to see my little over enthusiasm with cutting my own hair here. Other honorable mentions, while I'm making honorable mentions, Gru, the 4-issue miniseries of Gru versus Conan. This is what happens when your small child gets a hold of your comic book. I don't know if you can see exactly how much she wrinkled it up. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed the Gru versus Conan miniseries. The last issue was weaker than, I think issues 2 and 3 were really, really hilarious. And this started to get a little bit repetitive. But Sergio Agornas is going to do a 12-issue miniseries, or maxi series, coming up, I think, in January, that I'm really excited for now, called Gru, Friends and Foes, which is not a great overall title, but the idea is there'll be a guest character, perhaps, I gather, not always like Conan, the actual character, but maybe a character who obviously is making fun of some other character. In each issue, he'll team up with a different character. So I think that's a really interesting thing to do with Gru. And, Argonas is just unique, very, very, very cartoony, but just unique in his approach and his sense of humor that just comes through in every drawing. So anyway, Black Science was decent, but there was still some iffy quality to it. Umbral was very good. The art keeps getting even better. I really need to reread all of this together. There's bits and pieces that I don't quite connect to because I think I've forgotten them or didn't quite understand them the first time around. Baltimore is back on track. I feel the last miniseries was kind of pointless, but this one seems pretty powerful. Other stuff was good too. Futures End. There was even a good issue of a decent issue of Batman Eternal. Although everything in it was pre-spoiled, and if you take into account the long build-up in the Spectre story, the Spectre just finished things off, in 2 pages after, 6 or 7 issues devoted to the story where we're waiting for the Spectre to show up. So I thought that was out of balance in view of the whole series, but read as a single issue, it worked perfectly well. And that issue had pretty awesome art too. And I've misplaced it, which is why I'm not showing it. I enjoyed the Swamp Thing annual. I think it's kind of lesser soul because there's still a sense of repeating themes of, it worked out in a different way, but of someone possibly stealing the Swamp Thing's body again. And this idea of whether Capuchin, the character who's been alive for 1,000 years as an immortal assassin, is good or bad, and was she redeemed by Alec Holland, I thought she would already be redeemed by that other earlier Swamp Thing that she was in love with. But anyway, it wrapped up quite well, and it was quite a good annual. So I'm trying to think if there's anything I read this week that I did not like. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I still have some comic books to read that I haven't gotten around to, that I bought this past week, plus others from further back that I haven't gotten to yet. So, new comics tomorrow. You're probably watching this tomorrow. You're probably watching this on Wednesday or later. I'm hoping to be on the Comic Book Roundtable, which I think is back on this Saturday on Oddfellow Thoughts channel. And if I get time, possibly chatting with other people live on air in the near future, but I'm not sure about that. I will talk to you all later.